Alrighty, hello every folks, and good morning. Welcome to another edition of Know Your Unit 1 Vision, aka Know Your Fried Chicken. So today we are talking about a unit that gave some of the most veteran devs in the industry boss music a couple of years ago. That's right, we're talking about the Rogue. So this is a class that famously didn't actually make it to the official remake as a playable class, and it seemed strange to many because it's just like this is just the speedy crossbow guy. Like what could possibly be so complicated about this dude? And simply put, it's because the mechanics that this class touches were so pervasive that it basically was like mold growing in your roof. Like you think you're gonna flick away that one little thing and suddenly the entire corner of the house comes down. Effectively, their drop table for their steel skill that basically didn't even function right pretty much affected hundreds, if not thousands, of different scenarios throughout the entire game. A lot of their mechanics, simply put, didn't quite work the way you'd want them to work. Like their trap mechanic used to, let's say, have a small explosion that caused a bunch of debuffs, but they were only one range away, so oftentimes you'd end up just hitting yourself. They were supposed to work with the weather. The official guide even mentions that they're supposed to scale off of ambient weather for whatever reason, and they don't really seem to work in that way either. So it was essentially a move that you would do to debuff both yourself and an enemy at the same time, while using a card consumable to do so. The funny part about this is, why would you go about this complicated process of putting down a trap to have somebody step on the trap to debuff you and the other guy when you could just use the damn card for a 100% chance to inflict that debuff yourself? Like, oh man. Anyway, okay, whatever. Original version of this thing was very funny, but again, it was like half completed, and the weird half completed state that it was left in meant that it never made it to the official remake. However, down at the Dark Thundering Wizards Tower that I assume Rakes lives in, there was some quiet tinkering going on in the basement, presumably with a lot of kind of like Frankenstein laughter going on, as the Rogue was finally brought to its full beautiful glory. Now, it's worth noting, right from the get-go, before we forget about this little detail, this class is extremely open, being available to dang near everything. Like, for example, this right here, there's several unit types that I don't have on this particular save file unlocked yet. At least I don't have it unlocked for those units in the save file yet, but we have human, male, and female units that get it, Hawkmen get it, Lizardmen get it, Lamias get it, Ghosts get it, of both male and female varieties. Fairies and Gremlins. It's basically only skeletons and orcs that don't get access to the Rogue, and that's good stuff. So they're a class that's going to be very, very open. And additionally, they're able to benefit as kind of a nice, convenient side grade of a lot of different backgrounds. And I feel like this thematically works really well in One Vision. I don't know if it was intended, but it feels like the Rogue is sort of like the Ronin option. Like they had another job, and this is what they fell back on. Being a class that not only learns several skills naturally, but for example, let's say somebody was using swords, they'd be able to cross-class it over. They have, I believe, the second or third most open weapon table of any class in the game. But naturally, they learned fists, daggers, whips, sidearms, bows, crossbows, and again, you know, the only thing they don't have is heavy weapons, but they do get somewhat heavy weapons off of the one-handed category. Augment-wise, we've got access to the usual stuff. Racial-wise, teratology, draconology, psychology, golemy. They're a little bit limited there because of their openness. They can't have the same race as that particular thing. Parry and deflect for defense, overpower for getting past defense, counter hit going up to rank 2, bash up to rank 2, jump up to rank 2, which is really good for getting around. Basically just allows them to practically ignore elevation. Heron for getting through the water faster because they naturally have wade already built in. So this means that they can essentially walk through water as if it was normal tiles. Steadfast, which is new to them this time around, so that they don't get shot off cliffs, because they do like to be sneaky, and this is very useful for keeping them safe, especially in Palace of the Dead, where a lot of their tricks are very useful. Field Alchemy up to its maximum rank, so they can use all items. They get max up to rank 2, and tack up to rank 2 as well. Reflect Damage and Reflect Magic, if you would like to take advantage of their low defense for a little bit of free damage. Steel has been completely reworked. The skill itself, functionally speaking, does what it did before, but it doubled the range that it used to, and a quarter of the cost that it used to. And additionally, it's worth noting that it ranks up way faster. every single steal in the game is available by rank 2, with your odds simply improving as your ranks go up, so you don't have to get it to a particular arbitrary rank for seemingly no reason to go get some random piece of equipment or other. Additionally, there's lots of unique steals hidden throughout the game. You can technically get them other ways, but this is just another way to get them. Additionally, it's worth noting that all of the steal tables actually have interesting little kind of world-building quirks to them. So like I mentioned before, like wizards will carry around snitches from Harry Potter, or you'll see more frontline soldiers, doing a little bit of smoking in their off time, or you'll notice certain fancier characters will essentially carry dress versions of their armor and weapons for ceremonial purposes and stuff like that. So there's not only useful items that you can steal from using this, but there's oftentimes going to be some fun world building. It'll oftentimes give you a little chuckle, the kinds of stuff you'll find in people's pockets. I love this. It's one of basically the only time that I've repeatedly made a point to max out steal on at least one character. Not even making a point to it. It's just something I always want to do, because seeing these little world-building moments honestly just puts a smile on my face. All right, next we've got the sneak attack. This is something that was never worthwhile back in PSP, simply put, because it's essentially like a 50% damage bonus if you sneak up behind the other guy. The thing is, they didn't have that many ways to actually get around any kind of area-blocking units, and additionally, whenever you were using the sneak attack, you had an extremely frail unit just going right into the fray and putting themselves into the center of it. It was going to be a bad time. So, long story short, this time around, not only can you make them a bit more bulky, you can make them a bit more defensive, but the sneak attack has a much more useful variety of weapons to take advantage of, and oftentimes they can actually achieve the kill this time instead of just simply hurting something real bad. It just simply didn't have the kill potential before. Next, we have Bullseye. This is a more targeted version of what used to be the Eagle Eye effect, giving you sure shot in an area. Effectively, I like to think of this as the rogue serving as the spotter for a particular group, and this means, for example, let's say you have a ninja and they're using melee weapons, you can give them Bullseye to guarantee the poison on their throwing star. Same thing for poison crossbows, or for example, let's say you have somebody that's running any kind of thrown weapon category. I would argue the rogue is kind of the thrown weapon specialist. So this means that they will guarantee that breach, guarantee that slow, guarantee that hobble on their thrown weapons. So Bullseye is, I would say, probably one of my favorite prep moves of the game. It's incredibly useful. Not to mention, if there's any rainy weather, there you go. They're getting those shots lined up for somebody else. It's just beautiful. Low cost, high effect, and it functions in an AoE, so they effectively can buddy up with other units, just kind of team up as a spotter, and it makes them really good as a spotter for the associated sniper there. So, yeah, good stuff there. For the Reborn players, it's worth noting, by the way, that Sure Shot is not going to be tagged in with Overpower. That's something you will have to equip separately here. So if you are looking to, let's say, avoid deflections, you're going to want Overpower. Okay, next up, let's go ahead and talk about Speed Star. So this has had its RT cost reduced a bit. The funny part is that this used to almost kind of cost you as much time as it actually earned you. Back in PSP, it was oftentimes not worth it, because the class was already pretty quick. The bonus that it was getting off the Speed Star, as far as haste goes, that's one of those things that's always been just kind of like straight over my head. I'm not entirely sure what it's doing, but it makes slower units noticeably faster, faster units slightly faster, and oftentimes it just felt like a waste when you were using this back in PSP. It's kind of meh when it's used in Reborn, and again, another reason I'm pretty sure they just didn't feel like throwing it in there as a playable class, because it's just kind of there. Like, even on Buccaneer, it just doesn't really feel worth it there. Anyway, whatever. So, funnily enough, in Reborn, my favorite use of this was just putting it on Lord, and just giving them a bunch of very expensive abilities and just having them ignore time. Whatever. Anyway. Speed Star here is definitely more noticeable, generally a bit more worth it, and it's relatively, while its actual, like, cost per activation is fairly expensive, its recovery time is fairly low, and I believe it lasts 5 turns this time. It's like a locked-in range at this point, so that's good. Next up, we have one of the biggest improvements here, which is the Booby Traps, which no longer require you to kind of essentially debuff yourself for the purpose of activation, but additionally, I mean, I probably should also mention there were technically single-target traps in the other one, but they were also supposed to scale off the weather, which they don't. Whatever. Anyway. Off track. Booby traps in this one are freaking amazing. We're going to go over the list on them in a moment, but this is, I would argue, probably the most versatile skill in the entire game. We're talking about 50% heals of any of your 3 bars. We're talking about activating Ivory Tower. We're talking about almost every debuff available to you. And we're essentially just talking almost every element and ability type that you could possibly make any use of. It's really, really good. We'll talk about this more in just a second. And then we've got Opportunist for getting around those annoying flanky units. Or just annoying area blocking units and whatnot. Typical selection of wards, trajectory because it's amazing, and then we finally got Cokes. They can also bring in every other recruit skill as a way to go recruit stuff. Anyway, we're gonna go ahead and fast forward it here real quick so that we can talk about them traps because them traps are freaking good, dude. Okay. So let's go ahead and talk about traps, which they can't do yet. So we'll go ahead and have this guy go and give her a little bit of this action over here. He can't use it. Well, we've got the second best thing, which is a stick to the head. There you go. Think harder. Now that she's got traps, we now have access to frickin' everything. So let's talk about this. So Magician will do fire damage for 50% of something's health and inflict shackle. High Priestess heals 50% to a single unit. Empress heals a quarter of maximum MP. Emperor heals 100 TP. So this is an instant finisher. So you can set this up with 2 tiles worth of range. You can set this up for somebody to go drop a finisher on somebody by walking next to them. Hierophant deals light damage to a single target and inflicts sleep. Lovers deals lightning and inflicts bewitch. So this is straight up a mind control trap. This is basically an improved version of the charm trap from Felseal. Chariot deals earth damage and removes all TP when triggered. Very good on bosses, by the way. Strength grants Ivory Tower when triggered, so this unit will just be invincible until the next turn. Again, Reborn added a limit to how much Ivory Tower it can actually block. In this case, it's just straight up immortality. Hermit deals lightning damage in an area when triggered. Wheel of Fortune does air damage in an area when triggered. Justice deals ice damage in an area when triggered. Hangman deals ice damage to a single unit and inflicts bind. Death does dark damage in an area and inflicts poison. Temperance does water damage and inflicts petrify. Devil does dark damage and inflicts frighten. Tower deals earth damage in an area, which is funny because a lot of these area effect ones are actually the casting cards from March of the Black Queen. Just a fun little nod there. Star grants quicken when triggered. I'm actually surprised that Star doesn't give you what was it, negate or something. The magic shield thing there. Moon deals water damage in an area, which, by the way, Star traps. It's worth noting that this also means that you can effectively have your speed star at less than half the cost by just using these cards. Sun deals fire damage in an area. Judgment deals light damage in an area and inflicts stun. This is just a straight up kind of grounded flashbang here. World grants Apostate. Actually, no, wait, it was World, not Star that I'm thinking of. So yeah, it does still have the same effect then. Fool does air damage in an area and inflicts stop. You see what I mean? Like, these are really, really good. And again, when I say damage, they're doing 50%. They do 50% of the target's health, which means that, yes, against lighter targets, they don't do very much. But against tanks and such, like just instantly petrifying, fearing, anything along those lines, it's a very, 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 very good ability. So yeah, needless to say, I think they're pretty okay, So yeah, booby traps are a little bit difficult to use because you still have to get a unit to go step on that, tile, unless it's a beneficial one, then you can do it yourself. But it is worth noting that, yeah, they've got an absolute ton of potential there for just about everything if used cleverly. All right, so yeah, as far as their equipment goes, it's again worth noting that as far as their gear, they have access to what I would argue is the kind of like the medium tier here. So they get lightweight armors, they get some cloth armors, primarily just the Phantom Cloak there. However, if you wanted to go a bit kind of heavier on their gear, they do get access to kind of a medium selection of leggings and such. But they will have access to some additional piece of equipment that are a bit more useful for getting around. So things like this grappling hook over here for going and climbing up on top of things. And additionally, let's go ahead and double check their set effects here real quick, just in case I'm missing something. So, as far as gear access, yeah, for weapons, we already talked about that. For shields, they have all light shields, as well as the main gauche. For armor, they get light armor and some cloth armor. For gear, they get the grappling hook, light armor, cloth armor, and sniper gear. And that's about it. So that's basically all their equipment there. So yeah, very fast unit, very tricky unit, and I personally love using them as a spotter in any situations where you would need to have guaranteed hits. And remember, by the way, this actually also works very well with your monster unit. So, like, let's say you empower a couple of octopi or something like that, and you, let's say, give them throwing boulders for the purpose of attacking stuff far away. Same thing with stuff like a golem over here. Previously, in other official versions, you actually didn't get a bonus off of using your ranged attacks because it didn't use a weapon. So the sure shot never got a chance to trigger because it's checking, hey, is this guy using a ranged weapon? No? Well, no. Okay, I guess it does nothing. This time around, because they are counted as using a proper weapon, they will get that guaranteed effect from things like their throwing rocks. So that's very useful there. So just something to bear in mind that it will benefit everybody, meaning that this is one of the best kind of close range supports that there is. And I personally like running mine with high evasion and a poisonous crossbow, going for high evasion, relatively quick speed. Though as far as other weapon types go, there's absolutely nothing wrong with going for things like claws or whatnot. They already have decent resistance, but going for something like MP claws on a sneak attack could allow you to really shut down a unit. Stuff like daggers are also going to get pretty meaty bonuses on the slashing variants. So note that if you are, let's say, running these bonus type weapons, some of them will have better bonuses than others. Like for example, there's a brief moment where the Barong and Batangas will really stick out due to that 12% slash bonus. But it is also worth noting that throughout the entire game, using swords on them is a very solid option. They're a class that back in PSP would be kind of useful for sniping units with a racial bonus weapon, and I would say swords kind of take the cake on that one this time around, since it does allow them to multiply their damage pretty darn well. So for example, 27% plus an additional 30% versus golems with this thing, yeah, that's pretty darn legit. That is a hell of a lot of meaty numbers that are already getting multiplied by 50%. So you're going to see some pretty solid stuff coming out of there. So yeah, just kind of bear that in mind. As far as whips go, this is a bit more of a safe version of the same thing, potentially allowing for some oddly specific racial bonuses, but also allowing them to attack diagonally and potentially inflict a fall strike, which is just pretty, generally useful there. They also have access to blowguns, which is also nice in their hands. The Vretra is pretty easy to get a hold of. This is basically guaranteed to always hit at all times. So if you want to have one of those on hand, nice little peck move for them while they go and they, let's say, provide support traps. I was running that on this one for a little bit here. Or, for example, using stuff like those sure shots to get these slows and breaches and hobbles and stuff like that going. Also pretty solid there. Nothing wrong with a Chimera's Fist in this situation either. Being able to, let's say, guarantee that throw and also getting a guaranteed stun while also getting a built-in steadfast, So either way, lots and lots of options for you, lots of ways to potentially play around with this thing. The only one that I don't think I would probably go for here is railguns on these guys. I've seen some folks like using the boltcaster / railgun crossbows on these guys, but I just feel like for all the other bonuses that they have, mobility is kind of one of their big specialties, so sitting still and taking shots, I guess it works anyway. It does kind of work, because technically speaking, they could offset a lot of the recovery time from those heavier weapons. So either way, you know what? It's fine. You do you. You go with what works for you. And yeah, that's kind of about that. That's all I had time for here today. But yeah, every single drop table in the game was remade for these guys. Rakes was working at them for a really long time. I think in total it probably took him over a year. I don't know how much downtime there was in between, but it's it was something to the tune of a year between when they said that they were starting to work on it and when it actually came out. And yeah. If you ever find any, to this day, there's still the occasional report of, some random small thing of, I went and pickpocketed this guy 17 times in a row, and there was technically, a blank spot that should have been a dot somewhere or something, but, it is what it is. It's a crazy amount of work that went into the rogue. It's a fun trickster of a class. It's great to see how much effort went into the world building behind their steel table, behind their traps and everything. I love that the traps are basically using the same effects as the as March of the Black Queen. So yeah, that's kind of about that. Anyway, actually, does that confirm that Destin was a rogue the whole time? They don't have access to hammers. Does that deconfirm that? I guess technically, if they got the two-handed swords, they could always go for the female lord in that case. In which case, was Europa technically Ken? I don't know. Anyways, I suppose there's probably a bit more lore. Anyway, bye.